Well, hello, if you're just joining us, I'm David Gura. Memo meet Memo. Democrats hit back defending the government's surveillance of a Trump campaign aide, and President Trump continuing to muddy the waters in the Russia probe. No thank you. Another phone call leads Mexico's president to cancel a visit to the White House. A defiant NRA as companies continue to sever their ties after the latest school shooting. And the snake. The president appropriates a black singer's lyrics to talk about immigration. We will speak to the singer's daughters who are not having it as the president recites that lyrics yet again. We start this act of the hour with reaction to that memo written by House Democrats, which President Trump claims confirms all of the terrible things that were done, but which Congressman Adam Schiff, one of the memo's authors, argues confirms the FBI acted appropriately, and that Russian agents approached two of the president's advisors and informed the campaign that Russia was prepared to help by disseminating stolen Clinton emails. It is available to the public now, and here's what we can tell you. Its focus, like the Republican memo before it, is this man, Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, and it gives us some detail on efforts to eavesdrop on him. According to Democrats, the FBI had been aware of Page for years and had interviewed him several times about his ties to Russian intelligence. That was also long before Christopher Steele, a former British spy, was hired to conduct opposition research on then-candidate Donald Trump. Well, the Democrats' memo also contends that the FBI did tell a FISA court that Steele was hired by someone who wanted to discredit Donald Trump. Joining us now, Jason Johnson. He's an MSNBC political contributor, politics editor of TheRoot.com, and a professor at Morgan State University. Also with us, Jason Coaston. She's a senior politics reporter for Vox, and Chris Megerian, whose entire beat right now for the LA Times is Robert Mueller's investigation. Chris, let me start with you here this afternoon. What's your takeaway from this second memo that we got from the House Intelligence Committee?
So I think the most important thing is that Democrats make a case for the entire Russia investigation in general. Basically, they're saying that there was a good reason to suspect Carter Page, that the Russia investigation is not limited to Carter Page. There's other people that the law enforcement is interested in as well, and that they would have been remiss in not surveilling Carter Page. Basically, the Democrats say that law enforcement had no choice but to look into these Russian contacts.
Jane, when you look at these two memos together, what do you come away from? We heard the back and forth kind of explained by proxy over these last 3 weeks. We suspected what might be in this Democratic memo. What do you get when you look at the two of them together?
Well, I think that the information that both of these memos is based on is still classified. So I think that, once again, it's kind of a he said sort of situation. And I think that until we see some of the underlying documentation that the FISA warrants were based on, we still don't know enough to really know which memo tells us the real story.
Jason, I want to ask you just about the efficacy, so much as we know about the efficacy of this wiretapping. Of course, you had this warrant being approved. You had it renewed 3 times. We know now from the Democratic memo it was renewed by judges who were appointed by Republican presidents. What do we know about sort of the efficacy of the wiretapping, of the surveillance?
Well, look, you know, there's a belief that Democrats obviously believe, and the FBI obviously believes, that valuable information was gained from these wiretaps. So that's the key issue here. It's an ongoing investigation. So the Republicans sort of push that, hey, get out your memo, or we don't want your memo out, or this investigation should be over. This memo sort of speaks against it. It's like, look, we got this drip of information, we got this drip of information from Steele. All of this is towards building a long-term case. But I got to say this, David, I think this is really the most important thing we learned from this memo is that the Republicans keep lying, that there's more to this story than what we're being told. And rather than just letting the process go through, everybody wants to squelch the other side from being able to communicate.
Chris, I want to ask you about this memo, about these two memos as proxies for what's going on with the House Intelligence Committee. We've heard that they're building a wall between the two sides of their office space on Capitol Hill, that you have the ranking member and the chairman who are not, to say the least, getting along well as they proceed with this investigation. What can we tell about how they're working together, how this process is unfolding from the back and forth that we've seen over these last few weeks?
Well, I would say, for starters, they're not working together, and these memos show, once again, that you have this really intense partisan breakdown between the Democrats and Republicans. Democrats point to when Congressman Nunes went to the White House complex to view intelligence last year and then ran back to the White House the next day to, quote, brief the president on the information he learned at the White House itself. And since then, you really have seen this breakdown, and people have been involved with the committee for a long time say this is not normal. Generally, you have a much closer bipartisan relationship on a committee like the Intelligence Committee, and you really haven't seen that, and that kind of hampers the ability to reach a consensus on what's going on.
Jane, what did we learn here about the timeline? Something that was mentioned in that Republican memo was, aside from the fact this was a warrant for a FISA wiretap here, they said that the Christopher Steele dossier was also used as the grounds here for the FBI's investigation. The Democrats in their memo refuting that. What have we learned about the timeline of this whole process?
Well, once again, it's still an interesting back and forth because by the time that the warrant application was made with regards to Carter Page, he was no longer a part of the Trump campaign. And I think that that's an important note to make. But I also would say, again, that until we see the underlying FISA application documentation, the timeline is still a little bit sketchy in terms of both of these memos. I like to make, I like to say that these two memos are based on kind of two people watching the same movie, but we haven't been allowed to see the movie just yet.
Jason, I want you to comment on that as well. I talked to Joaquin Castro, the congressman from the 20th District in Texas this morning. He sits on the House Intelligence Committee. I mean, not only have we not seen the underlying documents, but many members of the committee haven't as well. And as we look at this whole process, to your eyes, how has that complicated what's happened here?
Well, it's complicated what's happened here because you have two different motivations, right? You've got the Democrats who are trying to protect an investigation because they really believe in Russian interference and probably because they want to take down Trump. And you have the Republicans who just don't want anything to happen. I've been at CPAC over the course of this weekend. CPAC just gave Nunes a Courage Award for trying to stop the Russian investigation. So clearly, there doesn't seem to be any agreement that there's an issue here that needs to be investigated. It's more of just a partisan battle. But ultimately, I think the real problem here is they have other jobs. This is the Intelligence Committee in the House. And just because they can't work together on this particular issue, what my concern is as an American citizen is how many other important issues of national security have been damaged by the inability of the Republicans to trust the Democrats. And I would hate to see our country suffer because they can't work it out over this particular issue.
Jason, great to speak with you as always. Thanks very much. Jason Johnson, Jane Coaston, and Chris Megerian joining me this afternoon. And to give us some more context about this memo,